Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you may
Shalom.
be. Yes, shalom, assalamu alaikum. And this is Fireside Chat number 40 with our special guest, what? What the fuck did I say? Our special guest, Spinosauruskin. And I am Brian, the host, and I'm joined by Mike. Hello, Spino, how are you?
I'm all right.
Cool. Thank you for joining us. And so, yeah, we're going to get to know Spinosauruskin. I met him for the first time at the ICMI, and we actually hung out quite a bit, and I had a really good time. And
That was
as
great fun.
well as, what was that?
It was great fun.
Oh, yeah, it was. It was great fun. And, you know, we hung out and watched the talks, and we had conversations, and it was a good time. So I figured, you know, as we do the Fireside Chats, we want to try to get different kinds of guests on, and I thought this week would be a great time to bring you guys, if you don't know about Spinosauruskin, you should definitely check out his YouTube channel. He does response videos mostly, talks about lots of different things, but you know what? Maybe I shouldn't be doing that. Maybe I should be letting Spinosauruskin do that. But first, I want to ask you a question, Spino. And that is, if you had one, what was your sort of what we always call the red pill moment? Did you
Ooh.
have a red pill moment? Bruv.
I really didn't have a red pill moment per se. It was a very sort of slow cascade that sort of built up over time. So I pretty much I started out in sort of the atheist community, and obviously people like the Amazing Atheist and Thunderfoot do a lot of anti-feminist videos as well. And they didn't do as many back then, but they did enough so that I think it was the summer of 2014. I ended up getting recommended Sargon videos, and Sargon had recently started up his channel. So then I started going down the rabbit hole and eventually discovered Dr. Randomacam, and that was how I discovered the men's rights movement.
Hmm. Was one of the videos that you happened to see by the Amazing Atheist, was it the one where he responds to the women on, I believe it's The View, with Sharon Osbourne and the guy's
Yes, that
penis
was
gets thrown in the garbage disposal?
that. That was one of them. It was also feminism versus freedom of speech, the big red thing. That was a pretty big one.
Yeah.
And I kind of I started to look into it a little more.
Did you ever get any, like, if you spoke to people, you know, like friends or family members or whatever, about this stuff, did you ever get the resistance that normally comes? You know, things like, well, you know, this is to challenge feminism is rude to women, or you know, don't you believe in equality and that kind of stuff in your day-to-day life?
I have spoken to so many people about things because I'm quite an obsessive person, which means I have like several topics that I'll talk about and barely anything else. So this eventually ended up coming up as a topic of conversation. And actually, I didn't seem to get as much pushback as I expected. A lot of the because I did speak to quite a few people at school when I was in sixth form, and most people were actually kind of on my side. They realized where I was coming from, and they understood a lot of the arguments I was making. There was the odd feministy girl, and one of them said, "Oh, you don't understand feminism. I did a paper on in sociology on it, so your argument's invalid," or something along the lines of that.
Mm-hmm.
And the two librarians didn't like me much either. But other than that, I didn't get a huge amount of pushback. And when I've spoken to most people, they will actually be relatively open-minded towards it. They'll sort of question me and they'll probe me a bit. But after I sort of flood them with human rights abuses, they tend to sort of say, "Oh, okay, fair enough. You've got some points here."
Mm.
And by the end, the people who will say, "Oh, what rights issues? Like, men have all the rights," they'll start listing off the men's rights issues that they know about. It's so weird, but you just have to get through that skin.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. And you said you challenged academics with this stuff, right?
Well, It was a girl who did A-level sociology. Academic is, well...
So you didn't like... I see, because I challenged my teachers and professors, and I managed to pass the classes because I wasn't... I don't know, I guess they just didn't feel like flunking me, but I think they were really tempted. They were very unhappy when they would bring up things like feminism and even Marxism. They would just bring it up in classes and explain it as though it's like a very pragmatic, thing to do. And then when I would stand up and say, no, wait, there's something wrong here, and I'd like challenge them on it.
No, there was one Marxist in our school, and he was one of my best friends, and everyone thought he was crazy.
Oh.
I'm glad none of this shit had taken off when I was in university. I would have been out on my fucking
uni was a completely different story.
Yes.
But the all-boys grammar school I went to was actually relatively fair. It seemed to be sort of like an island of sanity in a sort of sea of crazy. And that was,
Josh O'Brien popped in to say hello to us, and you, Spino.
Oh, hello, Josh.
And that's funny.
NC, I am not a white male. I am not a fucking white male. I am a fucking brown theropod. How dare you misgender me?
How dare you?
How'd you know they were brown? For all you know, dinosaurs could have been purple.
Let's hope.
Hey, you don't see the skin on the fossils, do you? For all you know, they could have been bright fucking neon orange.
How do they figure out what color dinosaurs are?
They just assume they're green or brown, I think. Yeah.
They make guesses, I guess.
I guess they make guesses.
Yeah.
Okay, well, anyway, that reminds us, so while we were at the ICMI, we did conduct an interview, a video interview of various people. We have, like, as Mike put it before the show started, over 150, is it 150 gigs, Mike, of footage?
Yeah, that was just the stuff I got from the Osmo and all that stuff. I had another at least 50 gigs of my own from the GoPro and the other thing.
So
we got lots of cameras.
Yeah, we got over 200 gigs of footage that we have to sort of sift through and put out. But among those is going to be an interview with Spino and Josh. So we might as well get an interview with Spino alone before that video leaks and everybody starts shipping you guys together in fan fictions. So, because that's going to happen, I'm telling you right now. The Spino X Josh stuff is coming out.
Yeah, the thing was, I was actually quite surprised by how short Josh was, and everyone was surprised by how tall I was.
Yeah? Huh.
I think they expected us to have sort of like we'd swapped heights or something.
Oh, Josh says...
Almost everyone is shorter than I expect them to be, except you, Spino. You're actually lankier than I expected. Oh, and Sandra Guy. I met Sandra Guy last week in the flesh. He's fucking huge as well.
Yeah? So, Spinosauruskin, why did you decide to make videos about feminism and men's rights? What made you want to get involved with this stuff?
Well, I had always had the idea of doing YouTube videos in mind for years. I didn't know how I would do it or what I would do them on or something like that. And then it wasn't actually men's rights that I did my first video on. It was Jen Kuger and the whole Bill Maher, Sam Harris thing.
Gross is racist?
It's gross, it's racist, yeah. And I just got really pissed off at that. So I thought, okay, I'll just try and do a YouTube video, see what happens. And then I ended up doing that. And I thought, actually, this is quite fun, and I just kept doing it. I didn't think, oh yeah, I should hide my face. It was too much effort on the software that I had anyway, and I just decided, oh well, everyone knows who I am anyway. They'll find me, and people at school knew who I was and what I did online, and there was no point in hiding my identity anyway, and I lost no friends, so I'm doing all right.
All right. And do you have any like YouTube, people that you sort of admire or look up to that you were thinking of when you decided to make your videos? Like, were there other YouTubers that you're big fans of? And I'm not saying that because I want you to say the honey badgers. You certainly don't have to say that. I'm just curious if there are other people. A lot of people.
I don't know if I actually watched Honey Badger Radio by the time when I started watching making videos. Oh no, I did. I did watch Honey Badger Radio before I started making videos. But it was Doc who I had I kind of took inspiration from.
That's right.
I'm your mini-me.
It's not even that mini.
No. It's like
you're still a lot bigger though. You're a lot bigger than me. Well, bigger, somewhat.
Yeah, you wait till you're in your 30s, you'll have a gut like this as well.
I meant taller, but you know, I was complimenting you.
Okay, so this week we did a show about the future of men's rights, but also the current state of like civilization and the way that people are, human beings, human nature, and how trying to like move.
The chat got very abstract.
Yes. So and it's hard to talk about what we need in order to see the future of men's rights without sort of like understanding how we got to where we are. And one of the things that came up in the early part of the discussion yesterday was this idea of the other. Okay? And in Allison's suggestion is that we have to unother, especially men, right? And I was also saying that as well, because I think that whenever we other another human group, we're, at least in my opinion, we're othering the men primarily. We're using them as the means by which we other. So we say, oh, the tribe over there has men that are dangerous to us, but they also have women that are useful to us, or whatever it is. Do you think that we can live in a world as human beings? Can we move toward this idea of living in a society, civilization, culture, whatever, without an other? Do you think that that's possible, or are you more of a in the Karen side where it's like I don't think that that's possible, but that's something that we can do?
I don't know if that's possible, but whether or not it is, I don't think it's something that any of us will see in our lifetime. So when I sort of think about trying to solve issues and where I see the future of men's rights, I kind of only try and look as far as I will be able to verify if we got there or not. So it's basically what I will hopefully see within my lifetime. Mm-hmm. I'm very solipsistic like that.
Okay. And then another thing is, do you think that we can, at some point, and this may be the same answer as my previous one, ever find a way to both care about men in the same way that we care about women, and also hold women to a standard of behavior that is parallel to the way that we hold men to a standard of behavior? Because this. Okay, go ahead.
I don't think it will ever be the same. I think we can get closer to an egalitarian society, but trying to get 100% total equality everywhere, it's kind of, well, you'll eventually be it will eventually be just impossible, and it's mostly just we need to get the big issue solved, and then work out at what point do we is it a waste of resources to keep fighting, pretty much. Okay. And eventually we're going to get to the point where say we got to the point where the sentencing gap was 2%. Is it really like a serious human rights issue at that point? Probably not. 2% isn't. It's not a be-all end-all amount. But at the moment, we've got a sentence. We haven't just got the sentencing gap of like something like 60%, but we've got a sort of female gender discounts on basically every level of the criminal justice system. So there's still a serious issue there. I still need to go into Philip Davies' talk and add up all the numbers, see how much of a difference a man would hypothetically get as opposed to a woman, and see how many if men and women committed the exact same crimes at the exact same rates, with all of the percentages we know, how much would we actually be able to tell? How many more men would be in prison than women?
Right.
Or how many less women would be in prison now, or how many less men would be in prison now, or how many more women would be in prison now, given if we took away these disparities? Because I think that would be an interesting thing to bring up.
Yes. Do you think that, okay, so you make a lot of feminist response videos, right?
Yeah.
Do you think that responding or fighting against feminism is something that MRAs should prioritize, or do you think that just ignoring it and dealing directly with men's rights issues is more important?
I think the thing is that it's kind of like pretty much men's rights issues are the goal, but feminism is the biggest thing in the way right now. It's the biggest, and unlike sort of gynocentrism, which is a sort of vague human tendency, you don't really have that with feminism. It's a clear political ideology, and although feminists, they're very good at trying to make it sound like a vague feeling or human tendency, it's clearly not, and most people will accept that. So I think it's number one, it's a really good sort of anchor point to bring sort of issues up against, and B, feminists are very good at pretending that they're going to be the solution. At the moment, the establishment thinks we are that feminism is the solution to men's and women's problems when it comes to equality, and we got to show that feminists are not doing anything, and when they do at least try to do something, it does more harm than good. That's something we need to get past before they'll even listen to MRAs. They've already got a solution. Why would they go and pick this new one?
Yeah, I mean, gynocentrism is something that I think it would be. That's a far more difficult fight, and I don't even know that it's entirely warranted, provided that we are able to at least get equality under the law and get men's issues recognized, that they exist. I don't think that it's a zero-sum game per se. So I'm not really when it comes to gynocentrism. It's one thing to simply acknowledge it exists because we're not a slave to it. But if we know it's there, then we can, if we think that it's irrational, we can probably resist, its temptations. But when it comes to feminism, that's a different thing because that is, as you say, it's a political ideology. It's basically it's an organized religion.
It's very possible that gynocentrism is natural. Well, it is natural, but it's very possible that it's more innate in us than androcentrism. Like it's something we sort of brought up last night when it comes to religion, and something I've observed. It's probably not a coincidence that so many feminists are atheists, and vice versa. Mm-hmm. That when you drop the sky daddy, you're left with nothing but your base animal instincts, and your base animal instincts are gynocentric. So when you take the sky daddy away, you're left with the earth mummy religion, and we can't drop the earth mummy religion. It's hardwired into us, So this is why it might be important to have not necessarily organized religion, but a bit of fanciful sort of imagination alongside us to remind us that if you're going to think of women as holy, then try thinking of men as holy as well, because otherwise you turn human rights advocates into the devil. That might be a problem. Yeah.
Currently, I think that there's this concept of the dual-layered mind. I can't remember exactly what it's called. It's like homo duos or something like that. Anyway, point is that at the bottom there is what they call the profane, which the profane is not necessarily like gross or disgusting. It means it's referred to as the norm. It's basically it's what our human nature is. And then above that is the divine, and that's where people want to get. It gives us the feeling of purpose and achievement. And the way that things seem to be set up under the feminist doctrine is there's something about men that they are slaves to the profane, and women are in the divine. They are the group to be protected. When in fact, these two things are not gendered ideas. They're simply aspects of humanity across the whole, like the fact that sometimes you just want to do something that pleases you in the moment as an individual. That is a profane action. That doesn't mean it's a bad thing. It's just what's described as. And then people who want to feel like they're a part of something larger than themselves, that is a strive for the divine, which is talked about in the TED Talk that I watched shortly before I did this interview. But there is something about the way that feminism and in other organized religions set that up, where they say if you're with us, if you're a part of this group, then you are among the divine. You have a purpose. If you're not, then there is some profanity in you that is preventing you from achieving this sort of state of nirvana, this level. Yeah, and I think that
it's sort of like I saw because you get billboards like, oh, teach your son to respect women or something like that, and it just sounds like boys are sort of born evil by default, and they can only be good sort of by the they can only learn to be good by the grace of feminism.
Yeah, they're slaves to their nature, which is it's animalistic or destructive in some way.
It's taken as read that they're not respecting their mothers, and it's taken as read that they are respecting their fathers. Men and women in general. It's just taken as read. Yeah, everyone's respecting men just the right amount, or too much, but by default you're not respecting women enough. Which could be the complete opposite of where some people are at. Billboard, if that is your real name.
So what is it that you think? What do you think about how men's rights has been done in the past, in whatever older generations, current generation, and what do you think? If you have any sort of thoughts or ways that you'd like to see it sort of move in the future, what do you think it needs to change if it's going to make progress, or do you think that we are making progress? Because recently there have been people who have brought up the word misandry is becoming more common use now. Even William Shatner used it when he was fighting on Twitter with the Mary Sue. And I saw an interview with an academic recently who said, when I talk to my students, he's basically fighting against all of this social justice on college campuses, and he was saying, when I talk to my students, they all know what the hatred of women is, which is misogyny, but none of them have even heard of or can even conceive of the idea of what the hatred of men is, which is misandry, although the instructor himself did know, which I think is, it's actually speaks to some degree of progress. But
when we can type it out in any software and not get a wavy red line underneath it, the word misandry, I'll consider that a small victory when it finally goes in the fucking word, fucking Microsoft dictionary or whatever.
Yeah.
Well, what do you think, Spino? What would you like to see with men's rights? How do you see it hopefully evolving, like as you get older and younger people hopefully start to sort of grab onto it as a concept?
I really think it's the thing with men's rights is I think it's always going to be somewhat fringe, that we're not going to become mainstream like feminism would. It's going to be very much more a much smaller group of people. That most people will consider themselves gender egalitarian. Some of them will bring up men's rights issues. Some of them will consider themselves anti-feminists. But the men's rights movement, the people who are actually sort of doing stuff on the men's rights issues, are very much more likely to be less popular than that more mainstream anti-feminism, which is going to probably blow up in the next 10 years. And I think
is that because of gynocentrism, or is it just because the institution of feminism is just so massive?
I think it's gynocentrism, maybe to an extent, but it's also the fact that a lot of people they have this sort of aversion to gendered movements, because there's so many people who think that feminism used to be this good thing, and then it's just grown into this this sort of evil, toxic ideology. A lot of them probably come under the misconception that this is what's going to happen to the MRA. So they want to just keep their distance from it before it falls apart in the same way. And actually, Josh just brought up a good point as well in the chat, that a lot of the people within the MRM don't really know how to talk to the media.
Yeah.
It seems that a lot of them aren't particularly confident, or they're very good at saying the wrong thing. Now, and I love Mike Buchanan, but on television he's not exactly the best. He's a lot of the time he sort of tends to go for petty shots and take shots at the feminists, which is hilarious, and and within our circles it makes him sound really fucking awesome. And if these people were actually recognized as bad people, then he'd be loved. Problem is, they're still seen as the victims because he's just sort of insulting them rather than bringing up points. And I think maybe people who are a little more, just a little more media smart would be a good thing.
So what we need is more charisma, and I mean we have a lot of charismatic people when on YouTube, or when they are within the circle of the people who have that interest. But it's like we need. Well, it's like Josh is saying, we need more Martin Daubneys and fewer Milo Yiannopoulos, like fewer edgelords, maybe.
Yeah.
but I mean, the edgelords kind of shine light on stuff that people don't generally want to look at, which is, I think, part of where they get. It's how we get exposed to these ideas.
Very often they're the canary in the coal mine.
Yeah.
To who gets banned.
And it's ironic that Josh would say we should edge towards mainstreaming. I don't know if that is meant to be a play on words, but I find it funny.
Yeah.
So,
I have to agree that we need more
charisma.
People who are people who are charismatic and sound reasonable
and good on their feet, right? Because that's the thing too. Like when you're doing, let's say you can make a great video that's like scripted and really makes your point very clear. But then what will happen is as the MRM picks up more momentum, there will be the media is going to come after them in a real way, and the way they're going to try to do it is to expose them, and they're going to try to put them on the spot, use gotcha moments and so on live interviews. So we need people that are good live, essentially, that can recall information quickly, that can remain. I don't know, basically not be, I hate to say be respectful, I don't want to say that, but I want to say be a really good conversationalist. That's difficult to
and not just, not appear hostile.
Yeah.
Teal Deer in the chat.
Yeah, I see. So we need to focus more on issues and facts and the data, and not just, God damn it, chat.
Yeah, but I named names Teal Deer.
Not just go for cheap shots and ponage because that doesn't solve problems. I wonder where I've heard that before. Oh, okay. So anyway,
that's a sort of that's
no.
between me and Teal Deer. I'll leave that away. I'll keep that off of the chat. But anyway,
thank you, Teal Deer.
Let me guess, in a couple of months you're going to be coming along saying, "Hey, don't call Islam misogynistic."
But go ahead, Josh. You were going to say.
But yeah, it's I genuinely think that what we do need people who are really good at not appearing hostile, and not appearing like really you can't sound like an arsehole, basically. Even if you actually are one, you don't want to sound like one, and even if you're not one, yeah,
it's like you want to make sure that you can be. You want people to listen. You want people that want to listen.
This is good advice for when you have any control over the edit or the outcome, by the way. If you're live on someone else's show or something, you cannot escape the edit. You say that we don't know how to talk to the media properly. It's impossible. It's literally impossible to talk to these media cretins and not get twisted into you know the soundbite they're looking for to do you. Actually, Josh is brilliant at this because the fucking BBC interviewed him for ages, and the worst thing they could find him saying was something about drunk sex in his video. Yeah, because Josh has he can speak like a politician. I'm not saying he does speak like a politician, but he knows that language brilliantly, and he can do it on his feet. Yeah, that's the sort of thing we need.
I have to admit, Josh is Josh is like the gold standard for what you want to do when it comes to speaking to media. You've got to be like Josh. And yes, okay,
I think you are really crushing on him now.
I knew someone was going to say that. but yeah.
Well, here's another thing too. I met quite a few people who watch either other men's rights channels or Honey Badger Radio. And I've spoken to lots of people, like, you know, that are our listeners. And one of the things that I'm noticed is that there are a great number of people that have an attraction or a predilection to men's rights. They tend to be like less social. They tend to be on. I wouldn't dare to say a bit spurgy. You know, like. The idea of emotional manipulation, for example, or it's beyond them. They don't have an interest in it, or they're not really. It's not like a strong suit for them. And I think that because you have to be so rational to think about men's rights, you always have to be able to cut off emotional impulses so that you can examine the issues dispassionately. And I think a lot of the people who are attracted to this stuff, they do that to a degree that it actually makes it harder for them to engage in, you know, the kind of political and almost, if not outright, sophistry that is involved in trying to change minds and change hearts. So I wonder if that isn't one of the larger obstacles in growing and expanding the men's rights conversation. Does that make sense? I was struggling with words. Words are hard.
Yeah. Yeah. It's gonna be a difficult thing because I understand where you're coming from. It's sort of a lot of people are so sort of obsessed with the logical, rational side that they don't actually know how to communicate with people. And
there's also an assumption that trying to make emotional arguments for the benefit of men isn't going to work. Because people, you know, we thrived mainly because of our ability to treat men as disposable and not think about them too much, which is why, for those of us who can do that, we try to focus on boys. But even those of us who are really good, like, for example, somebody in the chat mentioned Janice Fiamengo, and Janice does really great speeches, but she doesn't generally like to engage in conversations, you know, in positions where she might, I don't know, just because she's just not great in just sort of natural social situations, you know. But she is really good with pre-created content or as a speaker. It doesn't make her arguments less valid, but it means that she's going to have a weakness in certain arenas.
Yeah.
I also think... Yeah. Unless I've got booze or a script in front of me, don't let me speak.
Yeah, I've seen you sober.
I just a stuttering, pointless mess. Oh.
You're very, very quiet. But not when you're drunk. You will scream about about floor M.
Oh yes, floor M, which means mezzanine, Mike.
It means mezzanine. I know it means mezzanine now.
Oh, okay.
But it doesn't matter.
I see my banter. Great.
All right.
Yeah. So. It's. What were we talking about again? Yeah.
Well, some of Janice Fiamengo is an example, but it's basically all about like bringing more charisma and to men's rights, basically.
Yeah.
It sounds so bad. I don't. You know. I
really think Yeah, we really need our Hitchens, and we really need our and I know some people don't like Dawkins, but we need people like that who are willing to sort of tell it as it is and are capable of of actually like reciting information and things. And at the moment, the problem is no one's really listening to us. We need to really make a loud enough noise so that people will actually that we will actually get to be able to do the debates and things. That people will actually try. The media will actually try and engage us rather than 10 feminists on a panel and call that balance because because 5 of them are men.
Yeah.
Well, the first step is getting the feminists to agree to a debate. The next step is getting them through it without them calling us rape apologists and having a fucking issue for it.
Well, then the hissy fits are really good. The hissy fits are good for us because the crazier they are, the less crazy we appear.
Oh, they're going to edit it out. They're going to edit everything they can edit. That's going to be you got to do it one concession at a time. And if they finally agree to actually have big public debates like that, then they're going to control the edit. Be prepared for the worst because there's what's coming.
Well, I mean, if you see shows like The Big Questions, and then you've got you've seen Kate Smurthwaite break down on television, just sort of like scream at Milo, and arguably that's what we need to happen, but we need someone who's a little less edgy to do it.
Yeah. So essentially, what you have, it seems to me anyway, and that's actually kind of interesting because it's a little bit of a well, it relates to men and women. In a way, which is kind of interesting. There is a spectrum of mental states on the men's rights and in feminism, right? And I would say on the far end of men's rights, like if you go all the way, it gets pretty autistic. And I've spoken to several sort of people who say that they are high functioning autists. I'm
90-something% sure I'm somewhere on the spectrum.
Yeah, and that seems to be a common thing on the men's rights side, and that's why they tend to stay, very rational and reason and evidence is tantamount to forming these arguments, which they have observed and they've looked at the numbers and they've crunched them, and you can see that on lots of people, in lots of people's YouTube content or in their blogs or whatever that talk about this stuff. So on the far end of that, you have autism, which actually happens to be more common in men, in general. Like more men are susceptible to these like Asperger's and that kind of stuff. On the feminist side, all the way on the end of that, you have people that are just histrionic and narcissists, and they have a different kind of thing. They have a different disorder where they're all emotions all the time and they're ready to blow up at any given. I mean, look at all the people who get triggered by Milo's university visits. Every time he goes to a new campus, you get more videos of people throwing plastic trash cans and screaming at the top of their lungs. Or
needless to say, this is why all us Spurgs over here are very grateful to have an openly narcissistic, flamboyant chap like Milo on our side, because he's rare for us.
Yeah,
and he at least admits to it. He's like, yeah, I'm narcissistic. Which is unusual for a narcissist, by the way. Yeah.
To admit it?
Yeah, the most narcissistic people think they're too good to be narcissists. It makes sense.
Yeah, and I've genuinely met Milo in person, and I still can't tell where how serious he is and where the character begins and where Milo ends. It's still impossible to tell, honestly. But there's from speaking to him, it's obvious that some of it is not necessarily Milo, and it's obviously just to provoke people.
Yeah. So when we have those extremes, what we want is we want more people that see our side, but they're sort of like closer to the center, where they can engage people and be likable. Josh said, and I was just going to say this too, but likable enough that even if you disagree with them, you like the person, and so you're going to be more open to listening to them more often, and maybe after a while, you won't disagree as often as you used to. I think that I'm starting to see that to a degree. I hope that we see more of it. For example, this is a whole other different kind of tribalism, because I don't think personally that men's rights is political per se, but for the people who are sort of discussing it, you get, or at least are open to hearing about it, they tend to be more like figures like Steven Crowder. And I think Steven Crowder is pretty charismatic. And he's also smart. And even though I don't agree with everything he says, I like him. I think he's a good man. I also think the same thing about David Rubin.
Oh, I love Dave Rubin.
Yeah. So, I mean, if we had more voices like that, or at least people that are willing to listen to people on our side, and give them a platform, which Steven Crowder has had Karen on, at the very least, as an example. I don't think Dave Rubin has yet, but hopefully he will. I think he's... Oh, I'm trying to remember. Does he have Blair White coming on at some point? I think he's going to have Blair White on. But we are making progress. And that's also very helpful, too. We have men that are not just straight, white, cis. Not that that's important to us, because I don't think it is, but I think it is important to most people in the media that, you know, who's coming out matters to them.
Yeah, unfortunately, we do have to kind of somewhat play the identity politics game, just to show how bullshit the identity politics game is in the first place. We just sort of have to demonstrate its abject stupidity, which is why I tried to, and then I just ended up never getting round to doing what I wanted to call the Mansplain series, where I get a male feminist that says I get a female feminist that says a statement, then I get a male feminist saying a statement that disagrees with them, and just sort of just do like a shit ton of those. I only managed to get one, which was Steve Shives mansplaining to Marina Shazza.
Mm-hmm.
And so she said, like, rape culture is where rape is normalized and all of that stuff. And then Steve was like, no, rape culture doesn't actually mean where a culture in which rape is normal. It's just like where certain biases and things, blah, blah, blah. So, yeah, I like, I think, really, when some people say, no, we shouldn't play the identity politics game at all, I don't necessarily think that's going to work. We have to play the game to show its bullshit.
Yeah, I mean, Gamergate did that with the Not Your Shield hashtag, and I think that it was... I mean, people still resisted it and said, oh, sock puppets and, you know, race traders and gender traders and stuff, but...
The sock puppet thing ended up digging their hole further, arguably.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying. They couldn't really... They tried to do that because they actually... It wasn't because they wanted to pretend they didn't exist. I think it was mostly because they genuinely believed that those were fake accounts and that those people couldn't have, in the Not Your Shield hashtag, they couldn't be part of the identity that they claimed to be because that was antithetical to, you know, what the anti-Gamergaters believed about Gamergate. Those things couldn't add up. That was just cognitive dissonance taking its toll. And in many ways, this would have to be the same with regards to men's rights stuff, because according to feminists, you know, if you are a woman, even if you're a black person, whether you're or a minority group, male or female, if you are a trans person, if you're gay, you are by default, not only are you part of that group in terms of your genetics or your sexual preference or your race or whatever, but you are also part of a political ideology, and that's theirs, because that's the one that cares about you. So when people like Theron Meyer and Blair White, who are trans MRAs, or at the very least sympathetic towards men's issues, come out and they say, no, that's not politics, that's just what I am, but it doesn't determine anything else. Or when you have black MRAs, which there are some, many of them out there, and MGTOW, and so on, that stand in the face of what feminists and SJWs believe about, the identity being the political position, that just fries their brain. And people who are on the fence or in the middle or don't know, and then they see it, they say, what? I didn't think that this is possible. And that actually makes me interested. I mean, think about this. I got involved with all this because of Karen's videos. And the reason why, at least in part, aside from the fact that Karen's videos are awesome, was it was a woman, and she was standing up for us. And I was like, that's crazy. She had absolutely no reason to do that because, at least that was what I thought at the time, right? Because men's rights doesn't include women. Why would she do something that is against her interests? But then I needed to see that, and it just shook my brain, and then I had, I realized that what I was talking about, identity politics, doesn't make sense.
Yeah,
So
it is sort of it is kind of jarring to see a woman actually standing up and defending men. You can, like, when you see a man defending men, it kind of makes sense. He's like, yeah, I'm kind of one of them or something.
right, or you think, oh well, that's out of self-interest, so why wouldn't they do that?
Yeah, like but then when you see a woman defending men, it just it doesn't make sense from the sort of gynocentric perspective, almost.
Mm-hmm.
Which I think is one of the things that can knock people out of that mindset quite well. It just sort of hits them hard enough that they think, oh, maybe there's more to this.
Yeah.
Or if they are sort of still kind of too emotionally attached to feminist ideology, then they might scream at them and tell them to make them a ham sandwich.
Mm-hmm.
I want to ask Cenk, like Cenk was, and this was something that I see a lot of feminists doing, is they try and they try and take the whole like, feminism did this at one point, therefore you've got to thank us for it. Well, since Erin Pizzey founded the women's shelter movement, and the first women's shelters in the world, doesn't that mean every single female domestic violence victim has to thank the men's rights movement? By that logic.
By that logic, yes.
Yeah.
It's undeniable. Well, there you go. And
Yeah,
by the way...
Oh, sorry, go on.
Go ahead, Mike. No, it's okay. Go ahead.
Well, yeah, be prepared for the kind of shit they're going to throw at you. You don't have to go all the way to... We're not democratic lobbyists say we need more tacos in the bowl or some shit, because they're not going to, they're not already under scrutiny when it comes to racism or something. But like I say, we are. That's the kind of shit they're going to attack us with, identity politics. They're going to say your views are not welcome because you're male, white, straight, cis, etc. Delete as appropriate. So either you could take that argument on its face and try to argue with someone who's declared your argument's invalid, or you can do what it takes to win that argument. All that requires is, if someone says your argument is invalid because you're a man, if a woman then walks on and says, okay, now what? Then you've shown them up as the sexists they are. And if they say you don't matter because you're white, if a black person, I don't say bring on a black person because I know what that sounds like. But if a black person happens to then walk on and say, oh, hey, I believe the same thing as this person, now what? Boom, they've exposed you for the racist you are.
Yeah. Exactly. And I also think that one of the things we need to do is we need to maybe focus a little more on very easy to prove, clear-cut issues. So
start with one really big issue, right?
So I would say something like father's rights or domestic violence, because not only are they very easy to prove that it's happening, they are easy to prove that feminism is not the solution. It's actually contributed to the problem in the first place. But now we actually have a solution, and the only people in our way are feminists and other people who just want women to be treated better than men. At that point, we basically won the argument to anyone who is actually willing to have it. To be honest.
Yeah. Those are two good ones.
Father's rights is the most important one, definitely, in terms of society and in terms of men in general. Circumcision is more than anything a symbolic argument at this point. It's not as important, to society as father's rights. But I just want to see what happens if that gets made illegal. I want to see if it even makes it into the media. I want to see if there's an outcry. Well, there will be an outcry, but I want to see how the media suppresses the outcry about how dare they take away our baby torturing tradition. Because that's the measuring stick. And it's going to be the smoking gun in the history books. Oh, there was worldwide oppression of women, was there? What about that fucking foreskin farming industry you had that transcended all religions?
Mm-hmm. I was going to say that circumcision is probably the issue that is that will probably resonate the most on an emotional level, because once you start talking about
you're cutting bits of babies.
Yes, you're doing this to babies, and women generally very much care about babies. So, and to be honest, you're not going to be able to make a lot of progress with men's rights unless women get involved with men's rights. So, because they actually have influence not only over other women, but they also have influence over men, and there are just more of them. I mean, the fact that a lot of people say, I remember very clearly, Karen's great videos, and she got me involved, and she did. But there are a lot of great, or here's a better one. A lot of times people remember the times that Karen had caused people to get, like her opponents in debates, to get triggered and go nuts, like she did with Naomi Wolf and the way that she did with Cenk. But there is a really good debate between Sage Gerard and a guy at his college, and that one is lengthy, and he destroys that guy. And if you guys haven't seen it, go to Sage's channel and watch it. It's kind of old. It's like a year ago, I think. Just a really good debate. And it was actually, the guy tried everything in the book that he could, and it didn't work. And he didn't manage to go completely, like, he didn't have a complete meltdown the way that Cenk and Naomi Wolf did, but that only served to show how weak his arguments were, because he kept trying to make them, and they didn't work. And Sage was very, very prepared. But the fact that we typically don't remember them as clearly as we do the Karen ones, I think that that's actually a reminder that, if we're going to make progress in men's rights, we need to get women involved, and one of the best ways to do it is to appeal to facts around circumcision and let them know how harmful that is. And then fathers' rights, because we know that the absence of fathers in the home is the main correlated, it's one of the biggest contributing factors to things like teenage pregnancy in girls, as well as criminality in boys and girls. And that's because there are no fathers. And The Mask You Live In, basically, that movie that we did a fucking crazy long analysis of, the whole thing boils down to, we need fathers in the homes, period. But that's the one thing that they actually have refused to acknowledge, because feminists don't want to acknowledge that the family needs a father. I don't know why. It could be a number of things. It could be Marxism, communism. It could be whatever. But the point is, it's not working without fathers. So yes, I think that that's the way to go, personally.
It's men are dangerous to children. That's their idea. Is that they'll say it's because men are lazy and they just don't want to be fathers. No, it's because when they try, they fail, because it's extremely expensive. And Felfott's if you go and watch Felfott Returns, his channel, he's actually documented how hard it was to actually get his son back from the son's mother, who was a drug addict, was abusive, and still he was the one with the roadblocks. She had the kid and kept disappearing and relocating to different places. So when you see feminist organizations saying things like, "Oh well, the reason fathers don't get custody is because they work more or something," no, that's bullshit. And that's one of the other things that really needs to be shown, is that when feminist organizations talk about fathers' rights issues, they talk about it as men are bad. Still, it's never men are suffering. It's always men are bad and hurting themselves. Or men want this suffering, and it's not actually suffering.
Teal Deer said in the chat, he said, using women as the vessel through which to get men's rights into the mainstream could work, but also carries risks. Consider that black rights, gay rights, etc. did the same thing, i.e. used the same tactics.
Good point, but notice men are the opposite of women. Yeah, I mean that totally fucks their compass up. Yeah, blacks and gays could do it because they had a common enemy, the white man, the man, whatever, you know. They can't do it this time because the enemy represents the people without the rights. There's no enemies left. They've always had men as the enemy, as the fucking trump card up their sleeve, but it's not going to work this time.
Arguably, the other thing is the black and gay rights. They did actually end up choosing a partisan side that ended up picking it up, and like it or not, it was like, okay, maybe people don't like the way they ended up going about it, but it was the left wing that ended up picking up black rights and gay rights because they used it as a stick to beat conservatives with, and that ended up working quite well. Painting people as backwards, and we're the forwards-thinking people, and we're going to solve all the world's issues, and feminism ended up piggybacking off of that sort of that attitude, and is now pretending that we're the crazy conservatives trying to turn the world back to the 1850s. And we've got to point out that no, they're the ones impeding progress here.
Yeah, we've lost most of the historical documents of first-wave feminists talking about the tyranny of the Negro beast. They've all tried to forget, what the first wave of feminists thought about gay men. Exactly the same thing that the third-wave feminists think of MGTOWs. They don't love men. There's no brotherhood. They just hate women. It's just a cover-up for their hatred of women.
Oh yeah. But then again, there are quite a few MGTOWs that actually do.
And they can't cover up this much evidence. Look at us all. We've got fucking 200 of them now. 100 years from now, they can look back at this and say, no, you can't pretend that feminism was on board with men's rights from day one. It fucking was not.
Yeah, and we will be able to prove that because, yay, internet.
Yeah. Is there anything else that you think that? So I like this. Okay, so let's summarize what you were saying. Okay, MRAs need to get better sort of public faces, right? Better representation, something that will create interest because there are likable figures within the movement that we can talk to. People that are willing to essentially get tomatoes thrown at them as well, because it's going to come with a lot of hate at first. Then we also need to glom onto specific issues that are undeniable and also will garner enough sympathy from normies that they would actually want to see, that they would like to see that change. Something that Josh said is, just now, I said at the conference, and I'll say again now, the MRM is progressive in the true sense of the word. It is also rebellious and empathetic. It is everything that should be popular. We just need to show it.
Yeah, and I think the other thing is that young people are really going to help with this. The fact that a lot of MRAs have shown it's mostly most of us are online, but the young people of the MRM are going to be the ones who make it, who have the potential to make it, I guess, trendy.
It's like punk music. It's because you have to show that feminism itself and is the establishment. It's not. It's traditionalism 2.0. It's just taken up to 11.
Yeah, exactly. We need to show that they're the ones with the power. And there's still this used to be the sort of thing that I would see within and even anti-feminist circles was the idea that feminists were these crazy people on Tumblr, but most feminists they were still sort of a grassrootsy thing. Then when you actually look at the feminist organizations and how much money they take and how much power they have over the media and public policy, and they can even bully things like the FDA into accepting drugs, then you realize that these people are not the sort of rebellious grassroots people. They're very much the establishment. And then that starts to take away the whole patriarchy argument, the whole idea that women are oppressed. If women are oppressed, then feminists are completely okay with it because they've been influencing public policy for over a century.
Mm-hmm. All right. So I have a couple of comments. This is how we'll close out. A couple of comments on the video that we did yesterday. and I want to see if you and Mike have any thoughts on what they are saying. So I thought that we got a lot of compliments. Mostly people were very happy with the video, but these are the ones that either they're trying to add something to it or they're trying to like bring a different perspective. So one person wrote, Mr. Tudor 2010, there will never be true equality until the injury or death of a woman is considered no greater tragedy than the injury or death of a man. Does anyone have any thoughts on that? I'll start by saying I don't know what this word equality means, and I'm starting to wonder if it's even a practical goal.
Yeah, it's unlikely, given that women are the ones that get pregnant. It suggests we're hardwired, at least softwired, to really be taken aback. As I believe Hitchens said at the beginning of one of his books, if you see someone kicking a woman in the stomach, any normal person would be horrified. Kicking a pregnant woman in the stomach, even more, immeasurably horrified. And there's something biological about that. There's something innate about that. We'll always be more disgusted by violence against women than by violence against men. I think we've skewed it way too far. Definitely. Yeah, and we can probably skew it back to something more close to biologically normal, perhaps.
Yeah, it's not about It's not about like getting rid of this this inequity completely. It's just mitigating mitigating this inequality to the point where there's sort of a basic standard that's not terrible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I kind of take the same sort of tack when it comes to something like economics. I don't care how much economic inequality there is, as long as the people at the bottom aren't in fucking hell. Mm-hmm. And at the moment what we have is most men, a lot of men are in hell because of the human rights disparities. And as soon as that starts changing, then we will actually be able to get to a point where it's just good enough. And that's going to be different for every person. So what we will end up seeing is the MRM will start shrinking again when the issues start to get solved.
Yeah, when I hear things like we will no longer need men's rights when gynocentrism is done away with, or when gynocentrism is no longer an issue, and I think, bruv, you're never going to get to a point where you're satisfied that that's happened. And that's what happened to feminists. They decided, feminism will no longer be necessary when we've got rid of patriarchy, and that's never going to happen because they see it wherever they look. That's why you have to be careful with terms like gynocentrism and stuff, and sort of wibbly wobbly goals like this, because you'll fall into the same trap of being defined by opposing something entirely abstract. That's not healthy.
You're just a PC tone troll. How dare you?
Okay, so the other quote, or basically the last quote, was given by Bruce Card. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. And he writes, I'd advise reading Darwin's Cathedral by David Sloan Wilson. And then he includes a quote. The key, argues Wilson, is to think of society as an organism, an old idea that has received new life based on recent developments in evolutionary biology. If society is an organism, can we think of morality and religion as biologically and culturally evolved adaptations that enable human groups to function as single units rather than mere collections of individuals? Wilson brings a variety of evidence to bear on this question, from both the biological and social sciences. From Calvinism in 16th century Geneva to Balinese water temples, from hunter-gatherer societies to urban America, Wilson demonstrates how religions have enabled people to achieve by collective action what they never could do alone. He also includes a chapter considering forgiveness from an evolutionary perspective and concludes by discussing how all social organizations, including science, could benefit by incorporating elements of religion.
Yeah, I think it's really when it comes to incorporating something like religion, it's sort of taking the good bits and trying to get rid of the bad bits.
Mm-hmm.
There are some good aspects to religious teachings. It's just a lot of the time the way they're justified ends up not being necessarily based on facts. But when then when you look back from the sort of societal context, you can understand how that worked. So it's sort of I guess it's really arguably if we could find a sort of middle ground between just a sort of nihilistic society and one that's sort of obsessed with some kind of sort of cult-like mentality, if we could just find something there that fulfills that need for, I guess, religious thought, but then doesn't come with the pseudoscientific dogma, then we might be on the right track to, I guess, wherever human society will advance to next. But it's just, will we find it? Is there something like that? Is it always a trade-off?
Mm-hmm. For as long as we don't have all the answers to life's questions, religion will likely be what fills that hole, so to speak. What rapes the mystery.
What fills a much-needed gap, as they say.
Yes, and that is the way in which I'm convinced that feminism is just another religion, because it tries to answer unanswerable questions with its own theories.
Don't trigger Dean.
Well, I mean, I'm not saying that it's morally the same.
We love you,
Dean. Yeah.
We love you, Dean.
I'm not saying it's the same, but I'm saying that it is. You know, not all. I don't think all religions are created equal either, and I think that feminism is especially destructive. But I do think it's a religion, in my opinion, and it's more dangerous because it's a religion that doesn't actually have to abide by, at least in the U.S. Constitution, or our beliefs of the separation between church and state. It is very much tied to the state. In fact,
yeah, that's the biggest problem with feminism, is that because it hasn't actually been recognized as a sort of as a group, as sort of a very well-defined group with very specific positions. It's been able to sort of infiltrate by not necessarily always by directly sending people in, but just sort of filtering ideas through, just
Mm-hmm.
the odd idea. So you'll find even Republicans not questioning the wage gap.
yeah, exactly, or using it to get votes, even if they don't believe it. I mean, if they think it's going to get them votes, they're going to do it. So it's enabling in many ways, because it's a very useful manipulative tool, and it's also, and this is why I think, as you said, I want to just talk about men's rights and get those addressed, but it's very difficult when we're talking about normies again. Most of them have been advised, at least in part, by feminist views, even if they aren't. They don't agree with the really crazy radical feminist stuff, the stuff that we typically laugh at, the stuff that is clearly insane. Most people still agree with, at one time women were literally chattel, like 100 or so years ago. At one time they couldn't vote. At one time, they couldn't have jobs or whatever.
And they don't often see the men's rights issue until it's clearly pointed out to them as a men's rights issue.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's because it was in my primary school, and I've probably said this a ton of times before, but not on Honey Badger Radio because I've never been here before. So when most of the time we did school trips at our school, but and most of the time the mums would come around because we were young, so they needed more than they had teachers to make sure that they could keep control of all the kids. So it would mostly be single mums or the stay-at-home mums that would come along. One time a dad came along and they had to send a letter out to everyone because it was a man. I don't think a single one of them thought that was weird because he was a man, they were thinking, okay, this is rational because he's a man.
Mm-hmm.
But then if you actually point it out to them, they think, oh, actually, yeah, hang on, that is a bit weird. I think it's a lot of the time, I don't think most people are as ideologically indoctrinated as your average, even coffee shop feminist. Most of them are, well, they're not even they don't even know what feminism is. I've met a lot of people who have absolutely no clue what that means. They've never heard of it before. So I think it means a lot more to. I think people aren't as bad as we can sometimes paint them out to be. It's just they don't think about things enough, and when they do actually think, then we can solve things. We can solve problems. Maybe. I don't know. I'm rambling.
No, it's fine.
People give me money for saying shit. I never would have thought that would happen. Turns out people are quite generous and helpful, and thanks, people.
Yeah. You bastard. The Spine, I think we're done, but I want to give you an opportunity to say if you have any questions for us, or if anything you want to say, anything you want to shill, whatever, before I wrap up the show.
I don't really have anything to shill, to be honest.
Do you have any questions for us?
No, not really. I'm not good at asking questions or answering them. I'm good at arguing with people, and that's about it.
Okay, and you don't want to argue with us?
Well, no, not really.
No,
we've met each other in person now. This is all just a formality now. Oh, you folks who've only ever talked to each other on Hangouts, you can't know what this is like. We're just it's like a phone conversation now. Remember when the other week when we were patting each other on the back? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah, and you didn't actually drink with us though. Do you not drink?
No, I don't drink at all. I just never started and can't afford to be honest. And well, I like keeping my critical faculties.
That is very fair.
Yeah, and I don't need to be drunk to have fun.
Some people need to drink to get to their critical faculties. Like I don't. I think that Karen runs on wine, cigarettes, and bitterness, but it keeps her making the great videos that she does.
I need to drink to tear down the wall between my critical faculties and my tongue. Sometimes it breaks down too far and my tongue goes like that.
Yeah, it's different things for different strokes for different folks. But all right, well, thank you, Spinosauruskin, for joining us. I will put a link to your YouTube channel in the low bar. If you guys don't know about Spino, you are missing out. You should watch the videos. And hopefully.
Also, I will point out, trigger warning. I have sort of been doing quite a few videos arguing with MGTOWs recently.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Yeah, so
let me ask you this: what is the crux?
I'm not representative of my channel completely. It's just I've gotten into some arguments recently.
No, that's fair. What is the crux of your argument with MGTOW? Like, what is it that what's the point that you're trying to drive home?
There's a lot of sort of pseudoscience, and they're getting a little culty. And I don't necessarily think that MGTOW has some kind of monopoly on not getting married and not having kids and not being gynocentric and things like that. Mm-hmm. It's sort of dictionary definition of feminism-esque, except they don't have a dictionary definition because they're not the establishment, so they don't have control of the books.
So it's not
Tesla. Tesla isn't yours just because he fucking didn't get laid, and the Wright brothers weren't yours just because they were each other's men for one thing. They went the way of his brother.
Yeah, or Jesus. Like I did hear that once. But then
Jesus
again,
is MGTOW?
Yeah, Jesus is MGTOW. I honestly. Actually, no. I think that was a joke. I'm not 100% sure.
When you say it out loud, it does sound a bit absurd.
Yeah, that's the point.
Does that make Zeus a pickup artist? Is his name Zeus V?
Zeus V.
Oh, what?
Return of Demigods.
I turned to a swan. Bitches love swans. Did he turn into like rain or like a shower or something?
I don't know.
Whatever. It's Zeus.
Yeah.
Anyway, so it's not necessarily MGTOW itself that's the issue. It's just like
it's more the online personalities that I find saying stupid shit, and I tell them they say stupid shit, and they're like, "Why do you hate men not getting married and not having kids?" I'm like, no, I'm not getting married or not having kids either. I just don't wear the label because you people are crazy.
Yeah.
And that's and that just then they go back to the same. Why do you hate men? Why are you calling us virgin pussies? No, I'm not. I've experienced that, and probably more than you have. Because I was the one I was the one who showed my face in all of those mainstream media articles. I got people talking shit about me. I know what that's like, and I have actively spoken out against the sex shaming. So fuck you. Yeah. That was a rant. I apologize.
No, it's fine. There was an article. Actually, I got to find it. I'll put it in the low bar for you guys to know that Spino made the news.
I made the news on plenty of articles.
Yes. So we'll put the information in the low bar, and I don't know. Like, I guess I'm done. I want to thank you guys for coming. Mike, is there anything that you want to say before I close the show out?
No.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Spinosauruskin, for coming on. Thank you, Mike, for joining me, and thank you guys for listening. Please share, subscribe, all that shit. Like, dislike, make a comment, tell us that we're, I don't know, like awesome or suck balls, whatever it is, and I will totally read the comments. And
maybe someone, some MGTOW make a passive-aggressive video where they're not naming names.
I'm not naming any names, but yeah, please don't do that. Just be direct. Tell us what you think.
No, but that's drama.
Because I hate fucking drama. Okay, I'm done. I'm getting out of here. Talk to you guys later.
I'm trying to